Okay, I got a question from a follower. Why did Biden sell so much of our oil reserves? This is going to be a detailed explanation of all the events that occurred and how all of that actually happened. And as I'm walking you through this, I want you to remember what the politicians were saying. First of all, COVID happened, early 2020. Oil markets crashed and oil went negative because Saudi Arabia increased production by 1 million barrels a day. They told you it was a price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia. Russia didn't increase production at all. It was just Saudi Arabia. And by the way, Russia is a part of OPEC. The price war was between OPEC and the United States. OPEC and the United States, not OPEC and Russia. So what happens? Donald Trump negotiates the OPEC 2020 deal. This deal, which took 9.7 million barrels a day of oil off the market for 2 whole years. That was in April of 2020. Then we had Operation Warp Speed and the vaccine rollout. And that was occurring at the end of the Trump presidency and the beginning of the Biden presidency. With the vaccine rollout, record numbers of people returned to the office, returned to work. And with that, oil demand rose at a record pace during a time when the OPEC 2020 deal was in place. That 9.7 million barrels a day was still off the market. So oil prices rose and gas prices rose with it. And you were told it had something to do with the Keystone XL pipeline. As if a pipeline can create millions of barrels a day of lost oil production. Then Russia went into Ukraine and oil and gas prices skyrocketed. Oh, and by the way, U.S. rig counts had more than doubled at this point. But U.S. drillers cannot simply add 9 million barrels a day to the global market. That's not a thing. It's a complete impossibility. Inflation rose to over 9%, and gas prices rose to over $5 a gallon. So in order to bring down inflation and gas prices, Joe Biden decided to release oil from the strategic reserve. But he didn't actually sell the oil. The oil was already sold. He just moved up the date to which it would be sold. You see, there was 5 pieces of legislation that had called for the sale of 240 million barrels of oil out of the SPR. The 2015 budget, the FAST Act, the Cures Act, the 2018 budget, the Trump Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. All of these pieces of legislation, except for the Trump Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, had bipartisan support. That means almost everybody from both sides agreed and voted on these pieces of legislation. That means the very people that told you that oil should only be sold out of the SPR in times of war voted for those pieces of legislation that sold oil out of the SPR for nothing other than deficit reduction. Your Ted Cruz, your Lindsey Graham, Donald Trump. So what the Biden administration did was they took these future oil sales and they concentrated them into a mass singular oil sell, where they sold that oil at over $94 a barrel. And that did help bring down inflation, and that did help bring down gas prices until OPEC started restoring production from the now expired OPEC 2020 deal. When it was all said and done, the Biden administration had released about 300 million barrels of oil out of the SPR. Remember, the mandated sales, the congressionally passed sales that he was using totaled about 240 million. So the Biden administration kept enough money within the Department of the Interior to buy back about 60 million barrels of oil. Which means what Joe Biden left in the SPR was exactly what would have been there after all of the congressionally mandated sales that Democrats and Republicans both had agreed on and passed the legislation to sell that oil. There is no oil missing from the SPR that should be there because Joe Biden sold it. All of the oil missing from the SPR is missing because Congress voted to sell it. The only thing Joe Biden changed was when. The SPR exists to serve one purpose: supply disruptions. It was built as a response to the Arab oil embargo, a huge supply disruption. It's never been used for war. It's not intended to be used for war. It's there because we're dependent on oil from other countries. And if they decide to cut us off, we need to have some. That is what happened with the SPR. Thanks.